What's up, Squadron? Aviation has given me a ton of amazing experiences.
Good job there. Nice rock, high wing.
But more importantly, it's introduced me to a whole new family of friends.
Like, dude, you're killing it. You're having a great day.
So just never give up.
Airport, and then, oh, by the way, I got carb ice while I was flying through, so the engine started running rough. And I had to
Join us tonight as we're cleared direct for some hangar flying. I am Bryon Bowman, and this is SuperAero Live.
That's a lot. I mean, a lot of cookies. What's up, Av Geeks? It's Wednesday, which can only mean one thing. It's time for another episode of SuperAero Live, and I am super pumped. I've been typing about it a lot. That's a really bad joke. I'm super pumped about our guest tonight, but first, I gotta say hi to some of you in the chat. Oh my god, can you tell I'm a dad? I'm a dad. First of all, go check out after tonight. Go, if you didn't see it, go check out Chris Palmer was on talking about his new panel, his new Garmin panel and his plane and all the Alaska flying and flying from Alaska to Oshkosh and all that stuff. Totally intense. We got a little like bromance going on last week. That was great. I want to say hi to some folks in the chat. Zach Sherman is here. Anitra is here. Anitra is basically, this episode is your fault, so thank you, Anitra. Hanger Tales is here. Jeff Jensen, Waukesha Pilot says, I'm here. We can start. Excellent. We're getting started. Marty's here. Scarface. I always just gravitate to Scarface because that's a funny name. 782 Papa's here. Who else is here? Scrolling down. Clucky. Clucky's here. Gary Smith. Guys, I see Plane Ladies here. The gang is all jumping in. We actually started mostly on time tonight, which is why it seems like people are filing in. While everyone's filing in, everybody, again, things I ask for every week, but it really helps the show. Share. We don't always get such high-profile guests on the show, so share it out. Like, subscribe. Still, only like 30% of you are subscribed to the show. That helps a ton. All that stuff helps a lot. So, yes, please, please, please share it, like, subscribe. And if you really love what you're doing, join the Sky Fam, the SuperAero Squadron on Patreon. That is an amazing community. We've got a Discord server where we talk airplanes kind of all day, every day when we should be working. It's pretty cool. Also, people noticing that it is super cold in Wisconsin. Yes, like negative a million. Anyway, enough of me talking about that stuff. You guys are very chatty tonight. Just Plain Silly's here. Matt Pollock's here. Brian Garrett's here. Man, the gang all filing in. Just Plain Silly. Check out his video about that guy with the parachute and the fire extinguishers. And also check the video about his gear failure in his plane with his wife. That was also a good one. I should stop talking and introduce our guest. Everybody, look who it is. Chris Thomas is here.
Hi, how are you doing tonight?
It's so good to see you. Thanks for listening to me ramble on and on. You told me you're in an airport. Like, are you in an FBO right now?
I'm sitting in the Denver airport, making my way out to Colorado to go on a ski trip at Wolf Creek Pass.
Oh, well, that's so you're gonna be cold too, but you'll be having more fun than me.
Yes, I'm working on it. Yep.
I hope you were. Some people were saying we come into Wisconsin, it's like negative 10 today in the southern half of the state, and I said you just got to wear a big hat. It's like that old Jerry Seinfeld joke about wearing the big hat keeps you warm. That's all you need. Anyway, so I want to show.
Whoops, I lost the audio.
Oh, you lost the audio. Okay. Well, while we sort that out real quick, I want to show people what you do. You do a lot of cool things for work, but I want to show one thing that you do for work. I'm going to play a little clip you sent me, and I'm going to put the audio on so people can hear it. I think it's important to hear it. So I'm going to roll that clip, and we'll be right back. Okay, so I think you were trying to talk to me through that. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Oh no, what's going on? That's going to be really hard to interview
Turn
you.
off the AirPods and see if I get you back.
Oh, well, in the meantime, everyone in the chat was talking about how that was the best sound in the world. The audio over of the T-6 slash SNJ, which we're going to talk about in a second. Ditching the AirPods.
Now we got.
All right, can you hear me? Now I can't hear you. Now we can't hear you. Oh no, it's the live technical thing. Okay, wait.
Can you hear?
Working it.
All right,
I've
we're
got.
good.
You got me.
Yes. Yeah,
5 by
we're good.
5. We figured it out.
Yeah.
Okay, so
We're
we
good.
just we played that video. That's like a normal day. One of the many things you do for work. That's a normal day at work. We should just start, and like if you want to introduce like what what is that you do for work? That's insane.
So I've got a couple jobs. So the first one is the one that really pays the bills. I fly for JetBlue Airways, based up in Boston on the Airbus T20. The second one is I fly for a company called Prevalence Aerospace, and we specialize in upset prevention, recovery training, loss of control training. It's one of two Part 141 UPRT companies in the nation, extremely high caliber of training. We do a lot of colleges and universities, FBI, DEA, CA, SEAL Team 6, corporate flight departments, other nondescript and government entities, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final thing was I flew for the Geico Skytypers, and I flew the number 2 position for about 5 or 6 years, and we did 15 air shows a year. And the busy thing is air shows are really 4 days long. Thursday's media day, which is probably the most important day there is. Friday's rehearsal, and then the show for the public is actually Saturday and Sunday. So it was a big time commitment. If in air show season, if you do 15 shows a year, that's 60 days at a minimum without fairing on Mondays anytime. So
that's a lot.
It was huge, but it was the great thing is it's not the 18-minute or 20-minute show that you do. It's the guys that you're with. It's the weekend. You know, if you start on Thursday, you're sharing the aviation and what you do with the media, with the kids, with the Make-A-Wish Foundation, going into schools and doing some public outreach on Thursdays, giving tours of the airplanes. You know, for lack of better words, has some kind of moving moment with organizations like Make-A-Wish Foundation when the kids come out to the airplanes on Thursdays. And we do that. And it's a busy day for the air show. So on Friday, we'd come out, we'd do rehearsal. And we don't know any difference. We show up, we have a tractor trailer. So our team's really 6 pilots, 3 mechanics, and a truck driver. There's 2 PR people that are assigned by, or they were assigned by Geico to make sure that Geico was represented, the brand was represented correctly. So we would brief. It was about an hour and a half long. We would discuss what went on in the last show. We'd watch videos from the last show. We'd go outside and walk the show through. It was small details. We'd sit in a room with a pen clicking. When the boss called all smoke, now click, everybody would click their pen. And if your pen didn't click with everybody else's, the room would stop and they would look at you. And in the room, you didn't have a name. You went by your number or your call sign. And, hey, two, what you doing? Your pen's not with everybody else. Why is your smoke? You realize this was the problem at the last air show. Or why are you out? Why are you in this position? So we would do that. Then we'd go out and fly the rehearsal. Or we would go walk through outside and spend about a half hour doing that. And that's with the verbalization, the cadence, the litanies of what's going on. And when you walk it through, you would walk it through in the position where you're going to be. And I can get into talking about cheating later on, but to give a brief explanation, you know how it always looks like the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds are in perfect formation, and the fact is you're not. you are always flying for the spectator that's at show center. So, trying to put my hands where you have the ability to see
here,
them.
let me do this.
So I gotta position myself. So if you were flying, you would always formation. The guy would be back. But if you picture when you're 45 degrees away from the crowd, I'm the number 2. I was on the boss's right wing. I actually would go out and very far up, almost abeam his wing. And therefore, anybody taking pictures from show center would see me in perfect formation. So you were always moving around to give the illusion that you were in perfect formation. So you were always moving around. The Blues do it, the Thunderbirds, the Snowbirds, the French team, everybody does it. So you would talk about your cheats and where you're going to be. And number 6, one of the solos was on my wing. And maybe he was going to let me know that I moved too quickly for him last time and it wasn't enough warning, and therefore I made him look bad. So it's this huge team effort. Then we'd go fly our 18-minute demonstration. Quite often we'd go up and Skytype before. We'd go overhead the crowd and type messages at 9,500 feet. And then come down, we'd do our 18, 20-minute low-level demonstration. And then we'd come back and we'd go watch the video, and we'd spend between an hour and a half watching the video, where your smoke came on, where people were, and critique and debrief that. So it was a full day of work to go do that.
That's super intense, and there's a lot. I mean, we could just also sit and watch this video all night. There's a lot I want to unpack there, but the one thing that I got called out. So on our Discord server, and I was mentioning this to you before the show started. On our Discord server, one of the Patreon members was like, "Hey, you put T-6 in the YouTube, like that Chris flies a T-6, but most of the team flies an SNJ." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know. I guess. Oh my god, and I'm getting rid of my AvGeek cred card. Like, I didn't know there was like a real functional difference." But so I don't know if we want to like nerd out on that for a second, since it was my bad.
Geeky member on this. So there were about 15,500 T6s, SNJs, Harvards, all the variants made. And so if you were looking at the SNJ was actually the Navy/Marine Corps variant. The majority of the Skytyper team are actually SNJ2s. There's one SNJ3, and then there's only one true T6. The SNJ2s were very early model. They were made in 1941. There were only about 75 of those made. There are only 13 left in the world flying, and 4 of them fly with the Skytyper team. So they are still working airplanes.
That's
the biggest difference is fuel capacity. So most airplanes have 180 gallons, 140 gallons, or 120. This tailwheel steering mechanism. So I should say the SNJ2 are all 180-gallon airplanes. It's a free swiveling tailwheel, not a steerable tailwheel, and the hydraulic system's off the difference. The electrical system got different in later years too. It was a 24-volt system versus a 12-volt system. So our airplanes, one of the calls when we go onto the runway is the boss says, tailwheel's locked in position. And when we brake on downwind, we do what's called our pitch-up brake, and he's going to call, we turn 135 degrees, he's going to call 135, 900 feet, 120 knots, turning downwind, and he calls gear down now, all 6 airplanes drop the gear, check tailwheel's locked. Because if you land with the tailwheel unlocked, you're going to leave the pavement. So tailwheel locked or unlocked is a very big deal in that airplane. But they got rid of all the gas. They figured students don't need 8 or 5.5 hours of gas with 180 gallons of fuel.
Oh, I suppose that's like the biggest functional difference is the tanks.
Yes, and they were wet wings. And the SNJ2 wings kind of, I don't want to say chronically leak, but it's a wet wing. It's not a bladder. So if you figure that they're up doing aerobatics, working the airplane hard, landing them hard, the rivets are always just working loose, and they had leaky tanks. So they went to bladders and solved that issue.
Gotcha. Okay, so there we go. You just educated me on that. I'll fix the title of the video after we're done.
The history of the airplane's fascinating. I fly with a guy at JetBlue who actually flew the T-6 for the South African Air Force in combat in the late 1980s.
Wait, what? Okay, I didn't know that was a thing that happened either.
So in the United States, we just used them as trainers. They were the advanced trainer. There was a very brief period of time where the Air Force used them as a primary trainer in the 1950s. Don't quote me on the year, but it doubled the time to get a guy to solo. So they quickly did away with that. But if you go to India, if you go to South Africa, Rwanda, places like that, they were flying the T-6 into the 1980s. But there's this JetBlue captain. He's a Czech airman on the Airbus. And Graham came up to me and he says, "Oh, yeah, I flew the T-6 in combat in the 1980s, that and the DC-3. They're flying it against Rwanda."
What? Okay. I got to Wikipedia all that later. Learn more about that later. So... okay, we got a lot of different ways we could go. I'm going to load up some more... you sent me so much beautiful footage. And this, you were saying it was this Orlando,
That's the
you
Fort
said?
Lauderdale show.
Oh, Fort Lauderdale. I knew it was somewhere in Florida. And so is there... I think... well, actually, let's take a step back. I want to actually start... because you're known for two things, right? We've been showing the footage of the low-level demonstration, but you also sent me just a little clip of the
solos. Yep.
Oh well, let's wait. Let's watch this. We'll let this one play out. And it's structured very would you say it's like kind of a classic low-level demonstration in terms of you have the solos, you've got the formation kind of like back and forth. I'm trying to think of the times I've seen you guys fly. What I'm remembering from it.
So it was an 18-minute, we advertised it as an 18-minute low-level demonstration. In reality, it kind of grew where it was just short of 20 minutes, but it highlighted the maneuvers and tactics used in World War II. If you take a pilot today, they're familiar with everything that we've done, and we would come in as a six ship, and gratuitously we drew an American flag just behind the crowd as we came overhead. And from there, we would come in a Delta belly pass, but then we broke off. And the solos would fight, quote-unquote, fight the diamond. The diamond would fight the solos. While the diamond's repositioning, the solos were going to be fighting each other with a guns jink. So there was always something happening in front of the crowd. And it was a precision formation team. Legally speaking, we had to be certified for aerobatics. We all had SAC cards. We're all certified for dynamic maneuvering. The solos were for solo aerobatic and dynamic maneuvering, but it's not a loops and rolls show per se. But we had a couple points where people are inverted 135 degrees, 90 degrees, things like that. You're moving the airplane across the spectrum. So, for example, here's this perfect example. There was a new guy that came to the team this year, and he had been the former F-14 demo pilot, Crunchy Burgess, who's also on the air show circuit and an L-39 show. And we would come out of 1,500 feet, the Diamond, the four-ship, and we would dive out of 1,500 feet, go down to 250 feet, and pull up nose high, probably 25 degrees, and roll about 70 degrees of bank, and then back down and kind of drew this figure eight in the sky. And we got out of the airplane when I was training him, and he is sweating to death, and he looks at me and goes, "I've never flown such hard formation in my life. This is so daggone hard." You are working for everything that you're doing, moving the power. And we've had a couple of occasions where the Blues have ridden with us, things like that, going on some training flights. And it's just totally different because you aren't going to fix anything with power in this airplane. You are dependent on using the geometry to get it right the first time.
So
most of the team came from the military, but there were two of us that were actually fully civilian pilots. So we definitely had our work cut out for us with learning the geometry and being able to get in.
And I want to revisit that in a second, but before we go too far, let's talk a little bit about, just because I think this is the other side of it, is the typing. This is an example of what it looks like I think we are all familiar from looking up, from the ground at the air show and seeing the finished product. But like for you guys up in the sky while you're typing, I wonder if we could talk about that, and then I want to dig back into the formation stuff. I know we're a little all over the place, but
Yeah, if you hold that picture there for a second, that would be good. So the business actually started in the 1970s, and right now it's controlled by Bluetooth computer. The boss has a tablet on his leg, and it's kicked out by a Bluetooth signal. There's antennas in the back of the airplane, and the smoke solenoid opens. So we're up at 9,500 feet, and we put out messages that are about 1,500 feet long and probably about 800 feet tall. They can be read in about any direction from about 15 miles. So they're very visible. It's very effective advertising. You can't quite see it in that airplane, but there's a blue stripe on the fuselage, and if you have another picture there, and then a white one on the wing, and you line those two up, and that's how you stay in a perfect line abreast, and you put about 2.5 wingspans between the airplanes. So if you had 5 airplanes, sorry, let me move my hand, 5 airplanes, and if you turn that, one's boss is in the middle, number 2 flies high, number 4 flies high, and that way the 2 outside wingmen have the ability to see the stripes on the leader's airplane. And our skytyping missions typically ran about 3.5 to 4 hours. We would leave Long Island, New York, go all the way up to a Sox game. So we do the New York beaches, the Connecticut beaches, the Rhode Island beaches, up over a Sox game, up over Boston, turn around, come back down. We put out about 33 messages up at 9,500 feet and then come back down. And originally, I was hired. I was never going to go to the air show team. I had basic station keeping. I was a formation pilot. I flew RVs and got involved in formation flying there. And quite a bit of tailwheel time. I towed banners for years, owned some tailwheel airplanes. So I fit into the skytyping operation, but not the air show portion. So I pretty much got told I would never come to the air show team. So after about a year and a half, I got the invite to go to the air show team after doing some ferrying for those guys too.
So, okay, wait, let me load this back up. So basically, you had mentioned it started like a long time ago. Now it's all Bluetooth, but before was it like coordinated?
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that part. So the current owner, his name is Larry Arkin. His dad started the business, and from what I understand, if you go back to a 1970s computer, they would have almost like punch card material, like the old bank cards. Most people are too young to probably remember this, but they would feed them on a roll, 2 rolls of paper, and it would feed through a computer, and it was sent out with traditional radio signals, and that's how it worked. And I guess in the early 90s it went to Bluetooth technology.
I will say that I am not too young to remember the punch card computer, feed it through the thing.
But that's how it worked back then. Yep.
That's kind of amazing.
The guy who owns the team now, and we're going to be skytyping up over New York this weekend. He's kind of winding down his airline career. He's in his, he's past 60 years of age at this point. But he started flying these airplanes and skytyping for his dad when he was 18 years old. So do the math on that. He's got to be one of the highest time T-6 pilots in the world.
That's amazing.
Amazing. Yep.
So, okay. So, I mean, this is all really cool. And by the way, folks, if you have questions, I see some questions in the chat. I'll go to the chat real quick. Some people were like quizzing us on the tech specs of the S&J versus the T-6, and I don't know if we want to get that into it. What's the useful load of the T-6 with full fuel? What's the useful load of the S&J? You probably actually know that stuff, but I didn't. It doesn't seem fair. You weren't expecting a quiz. But folks, if you have questions for Chris, like about formation flight and skytyping and everything, definitely put them in the chat. I wanted to go back a second. You mentioned this really interesting thing in terms of your history getting on the team and your history formation flying, and that was something that was really interesting to me as a pilot who's done maybe probably what a seasoned formation pilot like you would say is like maybe unsafe formation, right? Where I'm just like dabbling with my friends. We're like, oh, like, what's safe, what feels right. Wondering about how you got started in formation flight. You mentioned RVs.
Yeah, so I own an RV6, and I got involved with FFI. And formation got regulated because it was unregulated. It's one of those things of the FAA came in and said, kind of, hey guys, you can regulate this yourself or we're going to step in and do it. So the FAST organization, Formation Air Safety Training Organization, started, and there's what's called signatories. So you got the RV group, FFI, NATA, which is the North American Trainers Association, the Steerman Group, etc. So I got started with an RV6 through FFI, and there was a formation clinic that was down in Albemarle County, North Carolina. And I attended the clinic there, and I started flying with formation with some Navy guys that had RVs around home in Virginia Beach. And then ultimately, I ended up joining this team called the Bandit Flight Team down in the Raleigh-Durham area. And they're actually the busiest civilian formation team in the nation right now. They specialize in national anthem flyovers. So if you have an event, a Carolina Panthers game, there's a professional soccer game, name any outside event, the team shows up in the last 4 seconds of the national anthem, 6 airplanes, smoke on. Typically there's 4 RVs, 2 yaks. The yaks are going to have colored smoke. And in the last 4 seconds of the national anthem, there'll be a flyover with smoke on. They actually have a contract with the NC State where they make every single football game. So they'll leave, do the flyover, come back, and then as they come overhead the stadium, do a fan spread, then break into a 270 circle of the stadium with smoke on. And that's what they specialize in. The caliber of training there is excellent. Some people may be familiar with the name Mike Felucci. He was a vice president with AOPA. He was very big with the Red Star Pilots Association. He was the president at one point, the magazine editor of their newsletter, which is an excellent magazine. Mike Felucci came down, spent a lot of time training people. I can't tell you, hands down, he is just an amazing instructor. So I spent a lot of time being trained by Mike and flying with him. So I got my start with the Bandit Flight Team after I went to the basic clinic. And then a friend of mine was flying with the Skytypers, said, hey, do you want to ride along? And it kind of grew from there, and it turned into, I was riding with the boss, and he said, why don't you fly formation? And I proved not to be a hazard, and I had a bunch of tailwheel time, and that's where the invitation just turned into, hey, do you just want a Skytype? You're never going to come to the air show team. And it kind of grew. It grew after that. But, yeah, I got my start with the Bandit Flight Team. Like I said, it's the busiest U.S. formation team. I think last year they did about 70 events. They got a total of, I think, about 15, 17 pilots. So great organization, very high standard training, some absolutely great guys that are there. It's about half civilian, half military. So there's a mix of guys.
I'm sure people there's a lot of RV owners and builders that watch this show, so I'm sure you made them all very happy when you mentioned that you have the RV6. And the other thing I was going to make a joke is, like, that's all I can hope for is to not be considered a hazard.
When I came onto the Skytypers, the guy who trained me basically looked me in the eye and said, don't be a hazard, and these guys want to know that you're predictable. And I just took that to heart of, you've got to be predictable. And one of the other things was the caliber of people at the Skytypers is just, it's an amazing group of people. Everybody's got an interesting story of what they did, what they've accomplished. And I remember at one point I was asked a question, and I answered it, and the guy looked at me and said, stop. Excuses are tools of the weak and incompetent. Which one are you? And I was like, okay, I see where this is going. But that's how they approached it. It was deadly serious what we were doing. The approach to it, the level of standardization, the caliber of what they expected. It's okay to make a mistake. You learn from it. You coach each other. Everybody's going to make them. But to me, the greatest thing about being on a team like that was nobody else can look good unless you do your part, and you can't look good unless they do their part. You're all dependent upon each other.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more satisfying when you get out of the airplane. We flew great at Oshkosh this year. And we got out of the airplane. I remember Buick Eberhard, great guy, fantastic formation pilot. He's flown for Draken. He's flown for the Black Diamond Jet team. Buick's the highest time A4 pilot in the world. And we got out of the planes. We parked next to each other. And Buick just looked at me and was like, we did it. You know, we looked good. And it was because everybody did their part and looked good. Nonetheless, we went back and spent an hour and 15 minutes, watched the video, and talked about how we were going to improve it for tomorrow.
There's a video I'm gonna try to load in on the fly here. I wanted to ask you about. You sent me this video that was like, man, I don't even know how to. There we go. It's you guys with an orange plane, and I wanted to ask about it because there's some real intense things happening in this video.
And you may see too when you look at some of these cockpit shots that. I fly a 1941 airplane, but it's got an Aspen in there, a Bendix King angle of attack indicator, a Garmin 430 with WASPs. They had the latest avionics.
Yeah, some folks were playing guess the avionics package. There we go. I wanted to just let this roll out here. At some point in this video, there's some real like hot boy stuff happening.
Yeah,
but tell me a little bit of what we're seeing right here.
So that's Mike Ryskie in the Lucas Oil airplane. Just a great guy. We spent a lot of time with Mike. We'd see each other at air shows. Usually would eat dinner and breakfast together. But we did a couple of joint flights. So if you think about the best part of the story is I came on the team and Tom Daly looked at me and said, you know what the most important thing we do is? And being a pilot, I said, it's got to have to do with me. It must. And Tom said, it's media day. They don't care if we fly a show or not. So if all of your media days look the same, you know, how are you getting in the print, in the media, and what's going on? So this was one of our efforts to offer something a little bit differently, both for his sponsor, which was Lucas Oil, and us. Interestingly, airshow sponsorships, as you can guess, don't last very long. Do a rundown and see who's got what sponsorship. So Lucas Oil ended this year. Mike was the longest running sponsor in the United States. He had 20 years. We were the second longest, and we were at 19 years. But this was down in Fort Lauderdale, and we did it 2 years in a row. At one point, we flew on him. He flew on us. We did another one where he did an inverted pass where he came in, went about 10 feet over the canopies, and then pushed up negative above us, did some rolls above us. There's a couple of pictures I think I sent you where we've got a 6-ship Delta flying on him also. And we've got a couple with Rob Holland. Probably one of the coolest things that we ever did is I led a flight where we joined on Blue Angels 5 and 6. Yeah, that was definitely one of a highlight.
I think this is that negative maneuver you're talking about. That's the one I was looking for. Just like so insane to see like you guys down there, and then he's just like bye.
It was the whole day was a lot of fun. It was everything about being there. You think about the amount of work that went in to brief that and plan that, and the safety, the work that went into it. You know, last year, I guess it was actually the year before, on December 11th at the 11th hour, commemorating World War II, we put together an 11-ship T-6/SNJ flight when we were at the Stewart Air Show. So we flew with Aeroshell. And you've got two teams. They both fly two T-6s, different procedures, different words, how they do things differently. So, you know, there's quite a bit of briefing that goes into how to accomplish that safely.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's I'm getting more exposure to the air show world through this show and through the generosity of people that I've been meeting because of it, and that professionalism. This is interesting. I'm just thinking about it now. Like becoming a pilot, right? Like there was this weird moment, and I don't know if I should admit this. Like when I first started flight training, I was like, "Oh, there's like so much to do." Like, you mean I can't just get in and go? Like, there's like so much to do, right? And then what's interesting though, once you get over that and you realize that it's fine, you're still gonna have fun. Like, the learning and the doing and the rules are all part of the amazing amount of fun you're going to have. But watching that level up, right, as the more and more advanced the flying gets, and seeing the professionalism of the airshow community is kind of like mind blowing. Like watching like sitting in on a briefing for me. Sorry, I totally kept rambling, but sitting in a briefing and just hearing an air boss communicate to everyone just being like, "Yep, got it," and then it goes off flawlessly, like that blows my mind. So,
and I think everybody learns from each other. We were very fortunate to be asked to sit in on the Thunderbird brief 2 years ago. We've sat in on the Blue Angel brief. About 3 years ago, the Thunderbird boss came in and sat in with us, and he actually asked us why number 4 does a lot of our debriefing, and they ended up changing how they do things based on something they saw with us. So everybody copies and learns from each other. And you said something else. One of the things that was said to me when I first came on was somebody was doing a maneuver. It wasn't us, but it was another performer. And one of the questions that came up is, are you doing that for you? Or are you doing that for the crowd? Don't do anything for you. Make sure it makes sense. Make sure it makes sense for the crowd, and it's what they want to see. And quite often, I was working on getting my aerobatic competency card lowered, and the conversation came up of Cubanates or reverse Cubanates. And the ACE, the aerobatic competency evaluator, said to me, he said, the crowd doesn't know the difference between a reverse Cuban and a Cubanate. And when you do a reverse Cuban, that's for you, and that's much less safe.
Sure. I think I've heard that before, some version of that story before, in terms of that idea of like, what are you doing for you versus the crowd, and if you change it for you, I think the version I heard it was very similar to what you just said. Like, if you change it for you, you're also putting yourself at risk because you're changing something.
Then it's for your ego. Don't do it for your ego. Yep.
So I want to go back to this. So this is obviously the joke on the show is every week I get super excited about whoever was on, and I'm going to spend the next week until next week's show researching T6s and S&Js and formation flight and stuff. So if you are let's say a young in hours pilot, maybe not a young pilot, I'm not young, like where would you start? Like if you want to get involved in formation, you want to add that to your flying, like how do you would you recommend doing that safely?
You know, I'll just say the thing that makes me cringe. When I watch my aerobatic friends, or a good number of my aerobatic friends, fly formation, I cringe because they don't have step down, they don't have the basic safety. If you think about formation flying, you can fly, you can move my hands so you can see them.
There you go.
You could fly into somebody from behind or vertical. So anytime you fly formation, you are flying out, down, and back. So as my dad told me, if there's 3 accesses, you can screw up one of them and not hit anybody. When you screw up 2 of them, that's when you're going to hit somebody. And when you see pictures that people take where one of the fundamental principles isn't being adhered to, it kind of makes you cringe. The next thing is, if you and I or 2 people are flying next to each other and something goes wrong, one person can move pretty quickly. As soon as you put a 3rd airplane there, a bird comes through the formation. Is everybody going to do the right thing? Because your option of pulling out or doing something just went away when you have a 6-ship formation. The bird's going to come through the formation at that point. So do you have the basic safety principles? Can you safely conduct the flight? So when you go to a formation clinic, you learn how to communicate totally on hand signals. You don't need anything to be done with voice. So to a young person wanting to get involved in formation, the best thing they can do, in my mind, is find a community that has a lot of formation flying in an airplane that's economical to operate. So for most people, that's probably going to be an RV because they're cheap, they're inexpensive to maintain. You can buy an RV 3 or a 4 or 6 or something like that in formation flight. Not saying you can't do it in a Stearman or J3, but if you think about this, every single airport has got an RV, and if you throw a stone within 3 airports around you, there are 3 people that probably fly formation in RVs, so you have a ready-made group of friends to go out and be able to practice with. It's a perishable skill. So
Sure.
in my mind, the RV is the perfect community for that. Not saying it's the only community, but it's affordable, and there's just lots of people out there doing it.
So if I were to summarize, it sounds like, 1, find something economical to do it in so you can practice more. Although you did mention I could do it in a J3.
Yeah, so if you think about who's the signatory for that, I think it's I forget who the signatory is, but yes, people do it in J3. So the Elbert groups through the CAF
sure.
do a lot of certification.
Oh yeah,
So-
yeah.
But your problem is, then where do I find other J3 pilots that hold
Right.
fast cards to fly with?
Right.
Because you want to go fly with people.
So
And you need
basically,
somebody to mentor you.
that's what I was gonna say, right? So it's like the economical thing. So like you mentioned the RV because they're relatively efficient compared to a T6 or something, and then going to a clinic, like that was the part. Can you expand on that? Like, obviously, I shouldn't necessarily just go with my buddies and be like, let's see if we can not hit each other. Like it sounds like I should get
because
some
you are
training.
going to make mistakes. So probably the 3 biggest communities that I see are the NATA, which is the T6 group. Now you need deep pockets. The RV group, that becomes affordable to the reasonable man. And the YACs, the RPA, the Red Star Pilots Association, they are hugely formation. So that's another group. The great thing about the RPA is they allow dissimilar airplanes. So typically what happens is, whether it's the RV group or the Red Star group, you'll come down on Thursday, you'll go through ground school with an instructor, you'll probably sit in the back seat, watch a formation flight, maybe 2 of them. The next one is you're going to get in the front seat and have an instructor in the back seat, and you're basically going to have a coach or a mentor till you are cut loose to fly by yourself. In that case, you're only going to be involved in 2 ship, and you're probably going to spend the entire weekend only flying with 2 airplanes doing station keeping. You're going to move from the right wing to the left wing, to go in the trail, to breaking up and doing rejoins, running through emergency procedures, starting to learn formation takeoffs. You still won't get a fast card out of that.
So then what's next after that? It's just like keep going back, keep just repetition.
So I went back. I live in a very heavy military area. I live in Southeast Virginia, so there's a lot of Air Force pilots, a lot of Navy pilots. And one of the things is, I'm trying to think of the guy's name, Greg Reese. Call sign was Grease. And I was like, well, I'm going back, and I've got this RV, but there's Navy people. And he was a great instructor, and he said, Chris, you fly an RV. Make Navy guys come to the RV standard. Use the RV, the sight lines, the verbiage, the terminology, the hand signals, and those guys did. I actually saw him when I was commuting on Delta one time, and we kind of looked at each other like, I remember you. I've seen you before. So, but you have to go whatever the standard is. The RPA, slightly different words, slightly different hand signals occasionally. By and large, the fundamentals are the same. But you have to have a standard to follow, especially when you're putting more than 2 airplanes together, because it does become, you can't afford to be sloppy or you can't afford to be dangerous. Everybody has to know when somebody screws up a rejoin. I was at a formation clinic down in Waycross, Georgia, when a guy was hot dogging and he was in a yak. He was number 3, and he actually went under number 1 and had the tail of his airplane cut off and ended up burning alive in his airplane.
What?
And he was an experienced formation pilot. Yeah, it was, but he was hot dogging. And one of those things is, do you tolerate hot dog pilots in there? And he didn't do the fundamentals, just if you blow a rejoin, you roll wings level and you go to the outside of the formation, wings level, you decelerate, and you wait to get cleared back in. So he really blew about 3 safety considerations along the way. Is that something you really want to do and go teach yourself? Because the fact is, when you're practicing rejoins, you're gonna screw up rejoins, and you need somebody coaching you. You need somebody mentoring you, landing on the ground. I had some rejoins when I came to the Skytypers. I had a couple of rejoins of stuff that you just don't do in civilian formation training. One of my conversations with Chris Orr, his call sign was Soto. I remember looking at him, I was like, this isn't what we did when I went through the formation class. And I was like, you did this in the Navy. And he's like, nobody rejoins like this. You are learning this here. And because we rejoined head there. It was a head-to-head merge when we came in for the air show doing this. But, yeah, you got to have a standard to follow.
Well,
but I will tell you, too, the other thing is, I'm an airline pilot. I fly for a living. I've flown a lot of different airplanes. And I say all that to say this. I went to the formation clinic, and I remember saying, oh, my God, this is the most fun I've had in an airplane in a long, long time. I haven't had this much fun in probably 20 years in an airplane. It was the coolest thing I've done. I don't get me wrong. I enjoy my job flying. I've owned airplanes. I was still instructing all the time. But it was one of those things where you slide to the edge of your seat. And you're just like, this is freaking great. Dude, this is awesome.
I think the other thing for me, for folks who are watching who maybe aren't pilots or thinking about becoming pilots, one of the interesting things that happens the few times I've been in an aircraft next to another airplane, I had it's in my archive of videos, folks. There's like, I went and did the air combat thing out in California with the Marquettis, right? And they were joking about Blue Angel close or whatever, but you're like really close. And the thing that was remarkable about that is when you place another object in the sky with you, this weird mental thing happens to me. And this is like base level. Like I know you're doing aerobatics and all this crazy stuff, but just like seeing another thing there next to you places you 3-dimensionally in a way that you're like, for me anyway, like my brain shifts and I'm like, oh crap, I'm up here. Like, and obviously you're up there already when you're by yourself in the sky, but like, I don't know, something about that, like placing it just like, there's a little rush.
You triangulate your position. As I said, you want to go out and down and back. And one of the things, I wish I'd sent this picture, but if you were to show one of the Skytyper airplanes, there's a blue stripe on the wing with the aileron hinge on the bottom. And I put that on the number on the cowling. And then I should be looking down the leading edge of the horizontal stabilizer. And you never want to see more than 1/3 of the top of the wing, because that means you're in plane with him. You could hit him. So you always want to be stepped down and, out and then back. So you would triangulate your position, and that would put you about 4 feet out and about 8 feet back. And you're always kind of in this little circle of about, a foot, foot and a half, and you're always moving around. If you were to watch it in the air, everybody's, I don't care who you are, Blue Angels or Thunderbirds, you can't say the sentence, look at me, before you've adjusted the power again to fix what's going on.
Sure.
Whether you fell back or you're moving forward or whatever it is.
So awesome. It's such a cool thing. I mean, we barely talked about your airline career. We barely talked about upset recovery or anything that stuff. Before, we're almost out of time. We've been talking about formation stuff, which makes sense. Is there anything else you want to add about that other stuff? Like, could go? I know you're sitting in an airport. We should let you go. But like, in terms of other sage advice you have as someone who's like interacting with aviation and all three of these kind of very different, but like obviously related ways, like if someone was at home watching and you just felt like, man, this is my chance, I got to say this one thing, got to share this one thing about aviation, like what would that be?
Oh God, everybody's got opinions, but I think that the great thing about flying is you can learn something absolutely every time you go to the airport. You just have to be willing to listen. And a lot of times it's from people that you wouldn't expect to get that advice from. And until recently, I spent the last 17 years as a check airman at work. And one of the, I'll say the worst things I see as people pursuing an airline career is they never get in an airplane for the purpose of having fun. And it was always business. They went to a school, it's chasing ratings. They never learn to enjoy it. And typically at work, they end up being some of the most unhappy people. And they never, not to say, there's a reason they call it a job. It is work. But you might as well have a good time when you're at work. So I would say make sure you have a good time along the journey, whatever path that is. You have to have a good time, enjoy the people you're with, learn something. You would laugh. One of the best jobs I ever had was towing banners. I towed banners down at Virginia Beach. I learned so much about flying an airplane. You never went faster than 60 all day. It never got higher than 500 feet. But there's the 4 or 5 of us that were down there flying learned how to fly an airplane in slow flight for 8 hours a day, and it was absolutely great. And here we are all in our 50s and still talk about it.
The guy that does it here out of Timmerman Airport, man, he looks like he's having fun.
Yep.
Everyone lines up to watch him pick up the banner. It's kind of an intense looking maneuver. Before we sign off for the night, I know you're familiar with the show, but are you up to play a game with us before we sign off?
Absolutely.
All right. So the game is called Short Final. If you're new to SuperAero Live, it's 1 minute on the clock. I'm gonna ask Chris a bunch of quick aviation questions. No right answer. Well, no wrong answers. They're all right answers. Is what I was trying to say. No points. He's already won. And maybe someday we'll get prizes. I don't know. We could work on that. Someone who could give. I could give Garmin. Someone from Garmin. Just because they were talking about it last week. You guys, let's give away like a 750 every week. Let's do that. I don't know. Kyle, call me. We'll do it. Okay. Let's put some music on here. Some epic music.
And they have to be one-word answers, right?
They can be whatever. You can answer however you want.
Okay.
There are no rules here. First, everyone's going to want to know in the chat, when you fly, is it north up or track up?
North up.
Okay. What about the favorite airport you've ever landed at?
Ooh. Good golly.
You've landed at a lot. That was a hard one for me to pin on you.
Yeah, I couldn't even begin to tell you. It's probably some podunk place in Charleston, West Virginia, because they cut the top of the hill off. Couldn't even tell you the name of it.
I think I know what you're talking about, though. Okay, what about, I'm going to hit another hard one. Favorite passenger you've ever had?
Favorite passenger? Ooh. My dad. He was my flight instructor, too.
Awesome. We got 4 seconds left. Favorite, well, how do I rephrase this? Because you're going to say the S&J. Other than the S&J, what's your favorite warbird? If you could fly any other warbird.
Corsair, hands down.
Oh, that was easy one. All right, that was an easy one. Chris, this has been so fun getting to know you and hanging out, literally sitting at the Denver airport, taking the time to chat with us tonight. Thank you for educating us on formation flight and all the stuff with the Skytypers. I think I saw you guys at Oshkosh. Yeah, had to have. This past year you were at Oshkosh, which is kind of cool to put it together. So yeah, really, really appreciate it. Is there anything coming up for you that you want people to stay tuned for, or where they should check you out on social or anything like that?
Oh, well, I've got an Instagram account, CHR Thomas. I'm kind of working on the next chapter of where things are going. Just as the Skytypers, we're not sponsored by Geico anymore, but we do have a couple of air shows lined up for next year. And I'm kind of working on the next phase. I've got some irons in the fire, and a couple things are looking promising, so stay tuned. I'm pretty excited about the future.
That's awesome. Yeah, everyone go check out the Instagram. It's a lot of fun content on there. By the way, I don't know how long you're sitting in the airport, but Brian Garrett in the chat says the best beer pub at Denver is on Concourse C. So if you need a beer,
let me get rid of my airline ID. I'm on the way.
So yeah, I guess if you're working, you can't. But he says, he says it's the Great Divide on Concourse C.
Oh, I walked past that. Yeah.
He says that's the best beer there. See, the power of the internet, Chris.
Yep.
It's the power of the internet. All right. Thank you so much for being on the show. Everybody else, thank you again every week for coming in and watching our ridiculous AvGeek show family thing. It means so much that everyone's watching. And make sure to tune next week. We've got more AvGeek fun content. Also, mark your calendars. I'm going to be at Outlaw Stole end of February, announcing that National Stole competition. Come see that, which is a different type of flying than what we're talking about tonight, but super fun in the middle of the desert. Like literally in the middle of the desert. I've never been to the desert before. So I'm kind of nervous. Anyway. Chris, thanks again, man. I cannot thank you enough for taking the time tonight, and we'll see you soon, I hope.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Enjoyed it.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next week. Fly safe.